Welcome back to the Haunted Lore, where we pierce through the darkest corners of history to uncover the supernatural secrets that refuse to stay buried. Today, we're setting sail for the crystal-clear waters of Nassau, Bahamas. But don't let the tropical paradise fool you. Beneath its postcard-perfect surface lies a blood-soaked history of piracy, violence, and a ghost story that has haunted these waters for over 3 centuries. Today, we're exploring the legend of Blackbeard's ghost at Old Fort Nassau, where the spirit of history's most notorious pirate is said to roam the night, searching for what was violently taken from him. From the crumbling stones of a demolished fortress to the mysterious lights that dance across Nassau Harbor, we'll uncover how Edward Teach's reign of terror didn't end with his brutal death. It simply transformed into something far more sinister. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare yourself for a tale that blends historical horror with supernatural mystery. This is the story of how a pirate's curse became Nassau's most enduring nightmare. What made Old Fort Nassau the perfect pirate haven? To understand why Blackbeard's spirit supposedly haunts this particular location, we must first journey back to the early 1700s, when Nassau was far from the tourist destination it is today. Old Fort Nassau stood as a formidable guardian at the western entrance to Nassau Harbor, its cannons positioned to control all maritime traffic entering and leaving the port. Built in the early 18th century, the fort was designed as a defensive stronghold, but its strategic location made it invaluable to those who operated outside the law. The structure commanded a perfect view of the surrounding waters, allowing its occupants to spot approaching ships from miles away. This vantage point proved irresistible to the pirates who would soon claim Nassau as their own. The fort's robust construction, with thick stone walls and multiple levels, provided not just defense, but also storage for the immense treasures that flowed through Nassau's underground economy. Hidden chambers and secret passages, typical of military installations of the era, became perfect hiding spots for stolen gold, silver, and precious gems. But it wasn't just the fort's physical attributes that attracted pirates. It was Nassau's unique political situation. The Bahamas existed in a state of governmental chaos, with British authority weak and local officials easily corrupted. This power vacuum created the perfect environment for piracy to flourish, transforming Nassau into what historians would later call the Republic of Pirates. Old Fort Nassau became the unofficial headquarters for this maritime brotherhood, where captains planned their raids, divided their spoils, and settled their disputes. The fort's great hall echoed with the voices of men who struck terror into the hearts of merchant sailors across the Caribbean. Among these voices, none boomed louder or commanded more respect than that of Edward Teach. Who was the real Edward Teach behind the Blackbeard legend? Edward Teach, the man who would become known as Blackbeard, arrived in Nassau around 1716, but his origins remain shrouded in mystery. Some accounts suggest he was born in Bristol, England, while others claim he hailed from Jamaica or even the American colonies. What we do know is that by the time he reached Nassau, he had already established himself as a formidable pirate captain. Teach understood that in the world of piracy, fear was often more valuable than firepower. Standing over 6 feet tall, imposing for the era, he cultivated an appearance designed to terrorize his victims before a single shot was fired. His most famous attribute was his thick black beard, which he would braid with colored ribbons and hemp. But the truly terrifying touch came before battle, when he would weave slow-burning hemp fuses into his beard and hair, lighting them to create a hellish halo of smoke around his head. This theatrical approach to piracy served a practical purpose. Ships that surrendered without a fight meant less damage to valuable cargo and fewer casualties among his crew. The sight of Blackbeard's smoking visage emerging from the gun smoke, cutlass in hand, was often enough to convince even the most stalwart merchant crews to surrender immediately. At Old Fort Nassau, Teach commanded respect not just through intimidation, but through his tactical brilliance. He understood naval warfare, navigation, and the complex network of trade routes that crisscrossed the Caribbean. Under his influence, the fort became a sophisticated base of operations, complete with lookouts, signal systems, and a network of informants who provided intelligence on valuable targets. Teach's relationship with Nassau was symbiotic. The fort provided him with a secure base, while his presence and that of his crew brought wealth and protection to the pirate community. Local tavern keepers, merchants, and even government officials profited from the pirates' activities, creating a web of corruption and complicity that extended throughout the colony. But Teach's reign of terror was building toward a violent crescendo. His increasingly bold attacks on merchant vessels and his growing fleet of ships made him a target for colonial authorities. The very success that had made him legendary would ultimately lead to his downfall, and according to local folklore, his eternal damnation. How did Blackbeard's violent end create a supernatural legend? The year 1718 marked the beginning of the end for Blackbeard's reign of terror. Colonial authorities, particularly Virginia's Lieutenant Governor Alexander Spotswood, had grown tired of Teach's predations on merchant shipping. What followed was a carefully orchestrated military operation that would end in one of the most brutal and symbolic deaths in pirate history. Lieutenant Robert Maynard of the Royal Navy was tasked with hunting down Blackbeard. On November 22, 1718, Maynard's forces cornered Teach and his crew at Ocracoke Inlet, off the coast of North Carolina. What ensued was a vicious battle that would become the stuff of legend. The fight was close and personal, with both sides using cutlasses, pistols, and boarding axes. Teach fought with the ferocity of a cornered animal, reportedly taking multiple pistol shots and sword wounds before finally falling. According to contemporary accounts, Blackbeard suffered over 20 wounds before succumbing, 5 pistol shots and numerous sword cuts. But Maynard wasn't content with simply killing the notorious pirate. In an act that would fuel supernatural legends for centuries to come, he ordered Teach's head severed from his body. This wasn't merely a trophy, it was a deliberate act of psychological warfare, intended to prove beyond doubt that the seemingly invincible Blackbeard was indeed mortal. The decapitation carried profound symbolic weight in the superstitious world of 18th century seafaring. Maritime folklore held that a violent death, particularly one involving decapitation, could trap a soul between worlds, preventing it from finding peace in the afterlife. The more brutal the death, the more powerful and vengeful the resulting spirit was believed to become. Maynard hung Blackbeard's head from the bowsprit of his ship as he sailed back to Virginia, displaying it as proof of his victory. The head was later mounted on a pole at Hampton, Virginia, where it remained for years, as a warning to other pirates. Meanwhile, Teach's headless body was allegedly thrown overboard, where local legend claims it swam around the ship 3 times before finally sinking beneath the waves. This image of Blackbeard's headless corpse swimming in defiance of death became a cornerstone of the supernatural legends that would follow. According to folklore, the violent separation of Teach's head from his body created a restless spirit, forever searching for what was taken from him in that brutal moment off the North Carolina coast. What strange phenomena have witnesses reported at the fort's former site? Though old Fort Nassau was demolished in 1873, the site where it once stood has become a focal point for supernatural activity that locals attribute to Blackbeard's restless spirit. The reports began appearing in the late 19th century and have continued with remarkable consistency into the modern era. The most commonly reported phenomenon involves the appearance of a large, bearded figure in period clothing near the former fort's location. Witnesses describe an imposing silhouette that appears most frequently during the darkest hours of the night, particularly when storm clouds gather over Nassau Harbor. The figure is typically seen standing motionless, as if surveying the waters, before vanishing without a trace. What makes these sightings particularly unsettling is their consistency across different witnesses and time periods. The apparition is always described as a tall, broad-shouldered man with a wild, unkempt beard, wearing the long coat and tricorn hat typical of 18th century pirates. More disturbing still, many witnesses report that the figure appears to be holding its head at an unnatural angle, as if the neck has been severed. Local fishermen and late-night wanderers have reported encounters that go beyond mere visual sightings. Some describe hearing a deep, booming voice calling out across the water, speaking words they cannot quite understand, but that fill them with an inexplicable sense of dread. The voice is said to be particularly active during storms, when the wind and waves seem to carry it further across the harbor. The timing of these supernatural encounters often coincides with significant dates in Blackbeard's life and death. November 22nd, the anniversary of his death, is reportedly the most active night for paranormal activity. Witnesses describe an atmosphere of palpable tension in the air, as if the very environment is responding to some unseen presence. Perhaps most disturbing are the reports of physical interactions with the apparition. Some witnesses claim to have felt an invisible hand grab their shoulder or heard footsteps following them as they walked near the old fort site. These encounters often leave people with an overwhelming sense of being watched, as if unseen eyes are tracking their every movement. The psychological impact of these encounters cannot be understated. Many witnesses report lasting effects from their experiences, persistent nightmares, an inability to be near water at night, and a constant feeling of unease when in Nassau's historic district. Some have sought help from local spiritual advisors who often confirm that the area carries what they describe as heavy spiritual energy. Why do mysterious lights dance across Nassau Harbor? Among the most spectacular and frequently reported supernatural phenomena associated with Blackbeard's ghost are the mysterious lights that appear over Nassau Harbor. These ethereal illuminations, known locally as Teach's Light, have become one of the most enduring aspects of the Blackbeard legend. The lights typically appear as glowing orbs or pillars of phosphorescent blue-green light that seem to dance just above the water's surface. They move with purposeful intelligence, following patterns that suggest they are searching for something specific. The lights are most commonly seen during new moon nights when the natural darkness is at its deepest, creating an otherworldly contrast against the black waters of the harbor. Witnesses describe the phenomenon as both beautiful and terrifying. The lights pulse with an inner radiance that seems almost alive, growing brighter and dimmer in a rhythm that some compare to breathing. They move in ways that defy natural explanation, stopping abruptly, changing direction without warning, and sometimes appearing to respond to the presence of observers. Maritime folklore offers several explanations for these mysterious illuminations. The most prevalent theory suggests that the lights represent Blackbeard's spirit, eternally searching the waters for his severed head. According to this interpretation, the ghost is compelled to patrol the harbor where he once held sway, looking for the missing part of himself that would allow him to find peace. Local fishermen have reported that the lights seem to follow their boats, maintaining a consistent distance that suggests curiosity rather than malevolence. However, some encounters have been more aggressive, with lights reportedly surrounding vessels and creating navigation difficulties. These incidents often occur when boats venture too close to the exact location where old Fort Nassau once stood. The lights display behaviors that seem almost communicative. They have been observed forming patterns, sometimes appearing in lines, other times creating circular formations that slowly rotate over the water. Some witnesses report that the lights appear to respond to verbal acknowledgement, growing brighter when addressed directly and dimming when ignored. Scientific explanations for the phenomenon include bioluminescent plankton, marsh gas, or reflected light from the city. However, these natural explanations fail to account for the light's apparent intelligence and their consistent appearance at locations with strong connections to Blackbeard's historical presence. The timing of the light manifestations often corresponds with supernatural activity reported at the old fort site. When witnesses see Blackbeard's apparition on shore, others frequently report simultaneous light phenomena over the water, suggesting a connection between the land-based and marine aspects of the haunting. Weather conditions seem to influence the intensity and frequency of the light displays. They are most commonly seen during periods of atmospheric instability, before storms, during temperature inversions, or when fog rolls in from the ocean. These conditions seem to enhance whatever supernatural energy is responsible for the manifestations. How has this legend shaped Nassau's cultural identity? The legend of Blackbeard's ghost has become deeply woven into the cultural fabric of Nassau, influencing everything from local folklore to tourism marketing. The story serves multiple functions within Bahamian society, acting as both historical preservation and supernatural entertainment. For many Nassau residents, the Blackbeard ghost stories represent a tangible connection to their island's dramatic past. The tales provide a sense of continuity, linking modern Bahamians to the bold and dangerous characters who shaped their history. The ghost stories humanize historical figures, transforming them from distant historical abstractions into present-day concerns that demand respect and recognition. The supernatural element of the Blackbeard legend also reflects broader Caribbean spiritual traditions. The concept of restless spirits, particularly those who died violent deaths, resonates with African diaspora beliefs about the afterlife and the importance of proper burial rites. In this context, Blackbeard's ghost represents not just a European pirate's curse, but a universal human fear of death without peace. Local storytellers have expanded the basic legend over the generations, adding layers of detail and regional flavor. Some versions include interactions between Blackbeard's ghost and other supernatural entities from Bahamian folklore, creating a complex supernatural ecosystem that reflects the island's multicultural heritage. The commercialization of the legend has had both positive and negative effects on its preservation. While ghost tours and supernatural-themed attractions have kept the story alive in popular consciousness, they have also led to sensationalized versions that sometimes stray far from the original folklore. The challenge for cultural preservationists is maintaining the authentic core of the legend while allowing for natural evolution. Educational institutions in Nassau have recognized the value of the Blackbeard ghost stories as teaching tools. The legend provides an engaging entry point for discussions about colonial history, the golden age of piracy, and the complex relationships between historical fact and cultural memory. Students often find the supernatural elements more memorable than dry historical facts, making the ghost stories an effective pedagogical device. The international recognition of Nassau's Blackbeard legend has contributed to the island's reputation as a destination for supernatural tourism. Ghost hunters, paranormal investigators, and history enthusiasts from around the world visit Nassau specifically to experience the locations associated with Teach's haunting. This supernatural tourism has become a small but significant component of the local economy. What does modern paranormal investigation reveal? Contemporary paranormal investigators have brought scientific methodology to the study of Blackbeard's ghost, using electronic equipment and systematic observation techniques to document reported phenomena. While these investigations have not provided definitive proof of supernatural activity, they have recorded some intriguing anomalies that resist easy explanation. Electromagnetic field detectors have registered unusual readings at the former fort site, particularly during evening hours when supernatural activity is most commonly reported. These readings often spike without apparent cause, suggesting the presence of some form of energy that current scientific understanding cannot fully explain. Temperature measurements have revealed unexplained cold spots in specific areas of the old fort location. These thermal anomalies appear suddenly and dissipate just as quickly, often coinciding with witness reports of supernatural encounters. The cold spots seem to move through the area in patterns that suggest purposeful movement rather than random atmospheric phenomena. Audio recording equipment has captured unexplained sounds near the former fort site, including what some investigators interpret as distant voices speaking in archaic English. While these recordings are often difficult to decipher, some contain words and phrases that correspond to 18th century maritime terminology, lending credence to claims of historical supernatural activity. Photography at the site has produced several images containing anomalies that investigators struggle to explain. These include unexplained light sources, shadow figures that appear in multiple photographs, and areas of unusual photographic distortion that seem to center on specific locations within the former fort's footprint. Motion sensors have detected movement in areas where no visible activity is taking place, suggesting the presence of something that cannot be seen by the naked eye. These sensors often trigger in sequences that suggest a large figure moving through the detection field, consistent with witness descriptions of Blackbeard's imposing physical presence. The consistency of these anomalies across different investigation teams and time periods has impressed even skeptical researchers. While individual incidents might be dismissed as equipment malfunction or environmental factors, the cumulative weight of evidence suggests that something unusual is indeed occurring at the site. Psychological studies of witnesses have revealed remarkable consistency in their accounts, despite the passage of time and variations in individual backgrounds. This consistency extends to specific details about the apparition's appearance, behavior, and the emotional impact of encounters, suggesting either a genuine supernatural phenomenon or a shared cultural memory, so powerful that it manifests in consistent hallucinatory experiences. Where else does Blackbeard's spirit supposedly roam? Nassau is not the only location where Blackbeard's ghost is said to manifest. The legend has spread throughout the Caribbean and along the American coast, wherever Teach conducted his piratical activities. These multiple haunting sites create a supernatural geography that mirrors the historical pirates' territorial range. Ocracoke Island, North Carolina, the site of Blackbeard's death, reports the most frequent supernatural encounters. Local legends speak of a headless figure that walks the beaches, particularly near Teach's Hole, where the final battle took place. The ghost is said to wade into the water, as if recreating its legendary post-mortem swim around Maynard's ship. Hampton, Virginia, where Blackbeard's head was displayed, also claims supernatural visitations. The area near the original display site reportedly experiences unexplained phenomena, including spectral voices demanding the return of what was taken. Some accounts describe a disembodied head floating through the area, eyes blazing with supernatural fire. Charleston, South Carolina, where Blackbeard conducted his famous blockade in 1718, reports ghostly ship sightings that locals attribute to the pirate's spirit. These phantom vessels appear on calm nights, sailing with impossible speed and leaving no wake. Witnesses describe hearing the sound of cannon fire and men shouting orders in the darkness. The interconnected nature of these hauntings suggests that Blackbeard's spirit is not confined to a single location, but rather exists in a state of perpetual motion, forever retracing the roots of his living exploits. This geographic dispersal of supernatural activity reflects the far-reaching impact of Teach's historical presence and the enduring power of his legend. Some paranormal theorists propose that violent deaths create spiritual imprints that can manifest at multiple locations significant to the deceased person's life. In Blackbeard's case, this would explain why his ghost appears not just at his death site, but also at places where he experienced strong emotions or significant events during his lifetime. The variation in supernatural manifestations across different locations adds complexity to the legend. While Nassau's ghost searches for his head, Charleston's phantom ship appears intact, and Ocracoke's spectre reenacts his death. These differences suggest that the supernatural presence adapts to the specific historical significance of each location. As our journey through the supernatural waters of Nassau comes to an end, we're left with more questions than answers. The legend of Blackbeard's ghost at Old Fort Nassau represents something far more complex than a simple ghost story. It's a cultural artifact that reveals how communities process traumatic history and create meaning from chaos. Whether you believe in the supernatural or not, the enduring power of this legend speaks to something fundamental about human nature. We are drawn to stories that refuse to let the past remain buried. that insist on the continuing presence of powerful personalities who shaped our world through violence and audacity. The next time you find yourself in Nassau, take a moment to stand where old Fort Nassau once commanded the harbor. Listen to the wind off the water and watch for unexplained lights dancing across the waves. You might just encounter evidence that some stories are too powerful to be contained by death itself. Thank you for joining me on this supernatural voyage. If you enjoyed diving into the darker corners of history with the haunted lore, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We've got more terrifying tales from the past waiting to be explored, from haunted battlefields to cursed treasures, from spectral ships to phantom cities. This has been The Haunted Lore, where history's darkest secrets come alive in the shadows.